WBAL News Radio 1090.
This is WBAL Sports Tonight.
WBAL News Radio 1090 and the WBAL app.
And welcome back to WBAL News Radio 1090. Joe Miller with you this evening up till 10 o'clock as we talk Baltimore sports with you and much more. Now time to bring in Scott Wazz from the Face Off Hockey Show. Scotty, nice to talk to you. It's been a while. Welcome back to Baltimore.
It's been far too long, Joe. I tell you that much. Thanks for having me, man. I always appreciate talking to you. I
appreciate it as well, and it's always great to talk some hockey with you. And how about the Washington Capitals? You know, I want to talk a little bit about Vegas here in a second, but let's talk about the Caps here for just a brief moment. The thing that struck me more than anything, Scott, was the resiliency of this team. And it's not something that you usually would, an adjective that you would use to define this franchise. But every time they got pushed, they pushed back. And I was incredibly impressed by how they performed in Game 6. To me, that was a little bit even more impressive than what Game 7 was. But just a resilient hockey club that stepped up. Really, for the first time, this generation of players stepped up and proved a lot of people wrong, a lot of haters wrong the other night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the thing that they're using is they're taking what they learned from teams that beat them when the Caps were on top and they were supposed to be the Stanley Cup champs 3 years running. And they're actually putting that into their game plan and the adjustment of everyone. And everyone talking about, you know, guys selling out for blocks. These guys have bought in to the game plan that Barry Trotz has put out there. And the stars are shining too. Alex Ovechkin coming to play as he always does in the playoffs, which I think is, you know, everyone's saying he doesn't, is a terrible trope. Evgeny Kuznetsov, you know, getting the baton from Alex Ovechkin pretty much. And the grit guys as well, Devontae Smith-Pelly, Andre Burakovsky, Brett Connolly, these guys have come up in big situations for the Caps. And, you know, Braden Holtby hasn't been the best. There's been many times he's been very shaky in net, but, you know, the guys have actually bought into a defensive outlook and are counterpunching much better than they have in years past.
And you mentioned Barry Trotz, and Trotz, it's funny when they hired Barry Trotz with the Capitals, it was funny because his story is very much aligned with the Washington Capitals story, a guy that had a tremendous amount of regular season success. Now, there is the sort of the what hangs over Trotz going forward and whether or not he'll be back with the Capitals next year, but a huge tip of the cap for what Barry Trotz has done for the Caps this year, as you mentioned. And it was interesting because Tampa Bay talked about this a ton in the series, that if they fell behind, they felt like that was a huge issue. And a lot was that to do with what Barry Trotz and how he set up his team this postseason.
Exactly. And I think one of the bigger things, too, is the last offseason is that he stayed in touch with Alex Ovechkin a ton, making sure that he was buying into this program of a defensive game and an all-around game rather than just an offensive game for Ovechkin. And Ovechkin stepped up a heck of a lot. Kuznetsov has stepped up defensively a heck of a lot. And I think, you know, Barry Trotz, again, a lot of regular season success, not only in Washington, but also at times in Nashville. And I think that he's finally getting his due. Whether or not he'll be back, it's very hard. Even going this far, it's very hard to say that he might be back. You look back at round one when people reading his lips said to John Tortorella, "I'm not coming back." I mean, it's a very interesting situation that Brian McClellan, the GM of the team, is in now because Barry Trotz has taken this team and the guys have gotten behind him in a big, big way. Now, what they do against Vegas, that's going to be the big wild card here. And, you know, I don't know if it can save his job, but it's going to leave his mark on the DC area if this is his last ride.
Talking to Scott Wazalewski from the Face Off Hockey Show. You can follow him on Twitter at Scotty Wazz. And let's talk about the Vegas Golden Knights. And ironic that the Caps face the Golden Knights because their former GM, George McPhee, is now the general manager of the expansion Vegas Golden Knights. Scotty, how did they pull this off? How are they in the Stanley Cup Finals right now?
You never go against the house, and Vegas is the house right now. For some reason, they have gotten this ragtag bunch of misfits and done a great job with it. And it starts from the back end. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury was the perfect choice in goal for, you know, Vegas to pick up. And it was a no-brainer since he was available. And I think Gerard Gallant, the head coach of the team, has really brought this team together. I mean, I don't think anybody thought William Karlsson would be a 40-goal scorer when he scored 14 goals in the last two seasons in Columbus. Derek England being a big leader, Nate Schmidt putting in big power play minutes that he wouldn't have seen with the Capitals. I mean, these are situations where guys weren't seeing their roles develop with the teams that they had, that they were with last year. And finally, Gallant has seen this and has been able to put forth a great team, a great chemistry with this team. And they were that close to winning the regular season points title. But luckily, that's been a curse. And now they're the Stanley Cup final. And it's a heck of a story. And I think it's a fun story as well, not just for the NHL, but for, I think, sports overall, to have an expansion team just made up of just loose ends here and there come together as one and get to the championship in their first year.
You mentioned Fleury, who's probably the most well-known of the Golden Knights, 33 years old. It's crazy to believe that he's 33 years old.
Yeah, I know. Oh, my gosh.
We're getting old. 1.68 goals against in the playoffs this year. I don't think anybody really criticized the Penguins a ton because, look, they won a Stanley Cup with Matt Murray. But now you look back at that. Is there some criticism to be had with letting Marc-Andre Fleury go at this point?
I don't think it's criticism to be had. I think it was just the safety net being ripped away from the Penguins, because if Matt Murray were to falter or get injured, Fleury was there. I mean, he was there the past two playoff runs, the past two Stanley Cups for the Penguins, when Matt Murray kind of slid a little bit. And that was the knock on Fleury, too. He doesn't perform in the playoffs. Yeah. There's many times where he's faced against your Flyers and folded quickly. But I think now he's in a spot where he can prove himself as well as not have that much pressure on him. When you go into a Penguins organization, especially with guys like Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, you're going to have a lot of pressure on you just by proxy being in light of those guys. But now in Vegas, he made it his own. He's been phenomenal. Even, the Golden Knights as a whole with their goaltending, they played 5 goaltenders this year early on in the season, and Marc-Andre Fleury has been able to guide this team throughout, and this team hasn't faltered since. And it's funny because this really is the last hurdle for the Caps. If you believe in narrative, they beat the Penguins in the playoffs. They win a big Game 7, which leads into an Eastern Conference. Now they face 2 old foes in GM, George McPhee, and Marc-Andre Fleury. If this is going to be a storybook ending for the Capitals, this is the last dragon they really have to slay. Yeah, and I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop with Fleury because, as you mentioned, there's been playoff games where he'll give up 4 goals on 6 shots or something like that. And it hasn't happened, so I credit to him. You mentioned William Karlsson, which is really a ridiculous story when you go. He scored 6 goals in 81 games for Columbus last year, and he scores 43 goals this year with Vegas. How does something like that happen? I think, again, it's that whole no-pressure situation going on him. I mean, I think these guys, all of them, to a man, had a chip on their shoulder. A lot of these guys were traded in terms of, I mean, you look at guys like Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault, they got traded from the Panthers just so one got picked. Yeah. They had a whole thing, and Gerard Gallant just saw the talent that William Karlsson had, and he let him go. He let him be an offensive powerhouse. And I think a lot of people slept on him, and that's a big thing. When they don't have a lot of film on him scoring or what his moves are on the rush, then you're not going to be able to scout him as well. And I think that the element of surprise helped Karlsson a lot, and his just natural skill. This is a guy who was picking off corners left and right. You don't get to 40+ goals, on a whim. Now it's a matter for him to battle back and to battle through, guys actually reading what he's able to do down low. And I think he's done a decent job in the playoffs. 6 goals, 13 points in 15 games. Nothing too shabby, nothing obviously like his output in the regular season, but I think it's something to be said that, once you give these guys a chance to really shine with not a lot of pressure on them, they're going to take that opportunity because it could get them their next contract, whether it be with Vegas or someone else. Talking to Scott Wazalewski from the Face Off Hockey Show. When you look at Vegas defensively, nobody's great, but they're all really good. And I think that's sort of when you look at their roster, you go, there's not a lot of known big names there, but they have nice depth. They have a lot of players that contribute. And that's sort of where the secret of their success has been this year. Yeah, the biggest thing is that they had a lot of defensemen. I think they started the season with about 10 or 11 guys who could be NHL ready. But there were peaks at guys like Shea Theodore and Nate Schmidt being the top guys. Braden McNabb's been bouncing around. But really the guy on the defense is kind of the spiritual leader, not only of the defense, but of the team as a whole, is Derek England, the Vegas resident who played there in the ECHL with the Las Vegas Wranglers for many a year. Still had a home there in the all season. I think he is actually taking a big role, almost like I want to say Rod Langway, but actually winning. A guy who is not going to be flashy, but is going to get the job done, and going ahead and getting these guys motivated and showing these guys their true worth and being the glue that holds this defensive core together.
All right, when we tune into the Stanley Cup Finals first game 1 on Monday night, what are the 2 or 3 things that you think is going to be the most important thing as this series plays out? What do the Caps need to do? What do the Vegas need to do? What are the keys to this series when we all start watching on Monday night?
I think that both these teams are on a big stage. How they react to it in the first period, the first 20 minutes is going to tell where the nerves are at for these teams. After that, Ovechkin's going to come up big. He's come up big the entire playoffs. So I think that line is going to be one to look forward to. And I think that's going to be a line that you're going to see try to get shut down a lot. Vegas has to shut down the opportunities, not only from the top lines, but also of the depth line. So 4 lines straight, they're going to have to be on guard. Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be a key for the Vegas. If Vegas is going to win, it's going to go through Fleury, and he has to be strong. He can't revert back to Marc-Andre Fleury of playoffs past. And you say you're waiting for the shoe to drop, and I am too with this. And it would be a heck of a time for them to do it now against the Caps. And it would be everyone would be like, oh, it's Marc-Andre Fleury in the playoffs again. For the Caps, Braden Holtby has to be a lot better. There are many times where he has just looked very shaky. His rebound control is just not as great as it has been. He's focused, sure. He's not letting up the next goal, yes. But with this Vegas Golden Knights team who can counterpunch with the best of them, who have a lot of guys who aren't afraid to go ahead and go to the net and get those rebounds, that's going to be a huge thing, is his rebound control there. And also the Caps, if they're going to play this quote-unquote picket fence that they have, where they're just a swinging gate and just hoping that nothing gets by them, then Braden Holtby is going to be the key to all that. And their defense has been great this year for the Caps in the playoffs. So I think defense, offense across the board. And how fun is this? It's going to be the first time since 2007 that 2 teams are going after their first Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting situation to see what these 2 teams do, because there's going to be a lot of nervous but fun energy.
It should be a lot of fun. Scotty, as always, thanks for joining me tonight and dropping the knowledge.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon, bud.
All right, man. That's Scotty Wazz joining us here on WBAL Sports Tonight. Caps and Golden Knights Stanley Cup Finals